actually was started because I had an early morning wake-up call, and so I think I've told you guys about that. I woke up to policemen knocking on my door, or beating on my door at 3 a.m., and there had been a crime in the neighborhood, and for some reason they thought it was okay to come to my house. It's just that we do not have a lot of African Americans on my street or even in the neighborhood. And so I just thought, wait a minute, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was scared to death because I didn't know what was going on. So I decided that it's time to do something. It's time to change people's thoughts about African Americans. Don't assume because someone is African American that they're involved in a crime. And it was really, it's not something that I wanted to do, meaning that all my life I've had to raise 3 sons. So it has been difficult. It has been very difficult just trying to do that in a place where we all live. And so I remember it was Brandon and Brittany, or my daughter-in-law, my son, telling them one day, you know, guys, it's up to you now. I'm tired. Your generation has to do something about this. I'm tired. And actually, I just decided, you know, I'm just going to ignore any racism. I'm going to ignore any remarks people make. I'm just not going to do anything. I'm tired. It's time for me to rest. And then I get the wake-up call, and that's what I call it. It's almost like God says, no, it's not time for you to stop. You need to continue. So I now have this saying. I told my daughter-in-law, she's a therapist, and she deals with some interesting situations where she works. And so I told her one day, I said, you know, I guess I must be the one that goes into the lion's den so that you can go in and play with the cubs. And that's how I see it. Someone has to start breaking open, you know, not so much the doors, but breaking open conversation. Something that's going to help people to understand how to just build relationships. I see people as people. And I've been in environments ever since 6th grade where I was the only one. And it went all the way from 6th grade to 12th grade, and then in college we're 1% black and 99% white. Was undergrad school, and even when I got to Fuller, I didn't even notice that I was a minority when it comes to, well, I did notice race, but I did notice I was also a minority as a female, because we had many more males in our classes than females. And the only reason I noticed that is because a man actually, somehow the conversation came up that, well, there's such few women here. And I looked around the room because we actually had classes then. And I said, oh, I had noticed that. And he said, how could you not notice? I've been in most of your classes, and most of your classes has been predominantly male. But the other reason I did notice that is because when I was in corporate America, I didn't work with women and with people of color. I was usually minority in wherever I was. So I had become conditioned to being a minority. And so that's can be a difficult place.
And do you
because,
do you think your waking up experience that you shared with your first story also invited you to wake up to what happened in your history? Meaning that you didn't notice that you were in the minority, or maybe because you were so conditioned, and that now you're waking up to what that was as well?
Well, I think I'm waking up to, I'm part of that bridge. There's a reason why a majority does not understand minority. Minorities have always had to understand majority, or even if you say Asians or Latinos, because in most cases we are not the ones that are in charge. So you don't have a choice. You have to understand the majority. But the difference is that the majority was not trying to understand the minority. But since I've been working with, dealing with, going to school with, who was I going to befriend? So I've learned to befriend people. And so I really do see people as people. And so then I thought, okay, so that is the bridge. Because some minorities will just say, I'm not willing to sign up to do that. I'm not willing to educate anyone. All of us have been in this country for years, so everyone has had equal opportunity to get to know each other. But then what I realize is that the majority is waking up. So if you're waking up and don't know what to do, or how to deal with people that don't look like you need somebody that don't look like you to help you with that. And I understand that there are times when majority needs to talk to majority and minority needs to talk to minority. I understand that. But somebody has to introduce. And so because of the environment, I probably, some minorities would probably feel like I behave more like a majority. But there's reasons for that. But then at the same time, I have to live in both worlds. And so I'm fine with it. I'm accustomed to it now, whereas some people are just not accustomed to it.
And what would you like the majority to know about the minority experience?
Well, really, I think the real purpose for everyone, people are people. You will find some people are difficult to deal with and some are easy, regardless of who they are. I've had a chance to travel in other countries as well, so I found, I have friends who have never been to China, who, based on what we talk about in this country, about the country, and what we have to all keep in mind is leaders are one thing, but individuals are a whole nother ballgame. Individuals in China are just like individuals here. They want the same thing we want: love and respect. That's it. Now, leaders of the country could be different because they have different goals, different agendas. But humans have really basic need: love and respect. And if you can do that, you can really get along with people in any country. It's not that difficult to do. So what I want them to know is simply this: we're all just people. There's really not any difference in us. It's just that we're more persuaded by the cultures that we grew up with and the cultures that we live with and the environments that we're in. Some people who have grown up, like I grew up in a very small town in Mississippi. Now, am I the same as if I go back to Mississippi? Do they consider me? They don't think that I'm the same. They think I'm different. Even people that know me think I'm different. So, of course, your environment is going to have an effect upon you. But what we need to realize is if we love and respect, and respect is very key. If you respect anyone, they're going to respect you. I remember being, where was I at that time? Singapore. I was in Singapore. And I was supposed to be having a meeting with this woman. And her friend's mother passed away the night before. Well, of course, I've come from the United States. She's nervous because she's like, oh, I'm running a little bit late, but my friend's mother died. And I just said, well, why don't you go home? And she thought, are you kidding? I said, no. Your best friend's mother just died. We can do this tomorrow. And she was shocked, but at the same time honored the next day. Just like a sister, like a sibling. And so what I've found is the principles that we should be following as Christians. Treat people the way you want to be treated. If we do that, we can get stuff done. You said something in your sermon on last Sunday. You talked about a dream that you had. I was in the international terminal in San Francisco one day, but I was flying into Boise, Idaho. Now, how strange is that? I complained about that as I was walking. Why am I going to the international terminal and I'm just going to Boise, Idaho? But when things like that happen, I have learned to be still. So I sit, and I felt like I heard the voice of God say, He just said, "What do you see?" I'm sitting in the terminal, international terminal, to go to Boise, Idaho. What do you mean, what do I see? So I said, I see, because I would see people, especially men, hurrying out of the terminal, going by, coming in from wherever, and I would see women. And so I heard the voice again, what do you see? So this time I get out my paper and pen, because I do that. And so I'm just looking, trying to figure out, what am I supposed to be seeing? And so the third voice, what do you see? That time my eyes locked in on two women. One was an African American woman. She had braids in her hair. She was tall. She was slim. She was walking with a white woman who was short, who had very white hair, and they were walking quickly. So this is what I said under my breath to God. I see two women, diverse. Apparently they have somewhere they have to be. They're walking quickly. He says, what do you see now? So I look again, and these two women are walking. The white lady has a shoulder bag on her shoulder. It falls off. The African American walks around her, puts it back on her shoulder. They stop to do that, and they continue walking. And I continue to watch them. It fell off again. This time, they never stopped walking. The African American woman walked around, took the shoulder bag, put it on her shoulder, and they never stopped. He said, I'm going to begin to use women around the world to do business. Why? Because they will listen to me. Then he gave me the picture of a meeting that I was in about a month prior. I was in Japan meeting with a vice president. I was not a vice president. That is like a no-no. And I didn't know I was meeting with a vice president until I got there. Because the first thing you do is you take your business card and you turn it around and you're explaining who you are. And so when he turned his card around and told me his name and said he was vice president, I'm thinking, oh no, God, we're in trouble. He had 16 engineers sitting on the other side of the table. And it was just me and a gentleman from our San Diego division at the time. The issue was really the whole company's issue. We were manufacturing a part that was causing them to lose face. And he had re-engineered that part 16 different ways. I'm sitting across the table like, oh God, help me. And I truly did pray under my breath, I need your help. Because I had to say no to a price change. And even though he's told me we can re-engineer this part in 16 different ways and it would work more properly than it is now, but I still had to say no because I knew we were losing money. And so it's interesting that he started to tear. You do not say no. That's another cultural thing. So it's difficult, whatever. And so the Holy Spirit just said, turn your head. When you turn back around, I want you to talk to him like you're talking to your brother Royce. And that's my real biological brother. So when I turned my head back around, he had gotten himself together. You cannot allow that. 16 engineers, a VP. So I leaned across the table, which is not usual, and I started to talk to him with such compassion that it turned the meeting around. Only could that have happened if God had given me instruction. And so this is what I think we need to learn. God shows up wherever he needs to show up, anywhere in the world. And that's what I had to learn. I think that's why I got the opportunity to travel, because God needed me to know wherever you go, I can be there. So I don't have a whole lot of fear. Ryan was concerned with me coming this direction, but anyway. But I've learned not to have a lot of fear about that because I do ask. I've had so many situations where he just shows up. But I think if we all realize that God is the Father of all of us, how would you treat your blood brother or sister? If your blood brother or sister was sitting across the table from you about to cry and they're VP, you are not going to look over there and say, well, no, I cannot give you a price adjustment. You're not going to do that. You will be totally different. And so that's how I feel we should treat each other. Treat each other like we really care. And I think that's really difficult for some people because they feel that I don't know you or you look different. But we all want the same thing. It's no different.
And I think what I heard you say is in those different situations you looked and listened before you spoke.
Yes.
Yeah. And even in your sermon today, you talked about being discerning, and that we need to discern what our response is to a situation rather than react, maybe.
Yes. My question for you all, but since you guys are all in the group with the Sacred Ground, is: are you learning? Do you feel you're learning something that you have not known? There's a lot we've covered, I know, but like one thing I've learned is I did not know that Texas and California was a part of Mexico.
Right.
I did not know that.
I would say what I've learned more is about the systems that have been in place historically in our country to continue systemic racism.
Okay.
So after the Emancipation Proclamation, then we have Jim Crow, we have people being incarcerated for no reason because of their color. Then we have what I see as in the 80s when the mental health system for people who had mental health issues was broken up in the Reagan administration, and there was no other systems in place. And so what happens is many people with mental health issues end up incarcerated.
Yeah.
So it's a different type of segregation and enslavement.
And I wonder when the mental health were incarcerated, if that's when the police department started taking over more of the mental health issues. Because right now the police departments are not equipped to deal with half of the calls they get because they're mental health. Yeah, one thing that really struck me is how systemic the racism is, and I didn't realize just how deeply embedded it is in so many institutions.
Those were the things that were
the book that Dr. Jennings has written, I keep pushing that book because it is very academic, so it takes a while to get through it. But it is so good. I mean, he actually starts bringing us to a point where a lot of things that we do in the whole world is based upon European thinking. And I don't think we realize that. Even in Africa, it really doesn't matter. The influence is so great that everything we do and think, and I'm just going to give you an example of, if you want a law degree, what is the first place you think of going to get a law degree?
Harvard.
Why?
Because it's well known.
It's well known. Lots of money goes there. Lots of endowments are there. So you can certainly get a good education. But what else can happen once you graduate?
Well, you'll be in debt.
Well, other than being in debt,
you have connections for jobs.
Right.
That's it. You have connections.
Yeah.
And because it's Harvard.
And because you're in debt, though, you are indebted to the system to keep it going.
Well, that's true. That's very true. And then look at you. I apply for a job. Let's say I go to Howard University and I get a law degree. You graduate from Harvard. Who do you think is going to get the job?
Depends on where one is applying.
Okay, tell me about that.
Well, I'm thinking of people who are working for social justice may favor someone from Howard, thinking that they would have more access.
My son is shaking his head, so I think
Is he shaking his head this way, or is he shaking his head this way? Ryan, which way are you shaking?
I agree.
I'm just thinking, if one wants to keep the system going, one would hire someone from Harvard. If
Okay.
someone is questioning the system
Yes.
and looking for
Yes.
concerns that the system is ignoring, then
Mhm.
Howard might be a
Mhm.
choice,
And the,
providing a background.
you know, the thing that's funny about that, and I looked it up because I guess I just like to look up everything, but the teacher, the professor-student ratio is about the same,
Howard
but the
and Harvard.
cost,
Uh-huh.
the cost is tremendously different.
Right.
And so, but we've been taught a school that represents African Americans are not as good as a school that would represent white Americans. And so, if I were to go back to Mississippi, I went to Mississippi State University on purpose because it was 99% white.
Mm.
And so, but the misfortune I had was this: when I graduated, it was funny because I had another friend of mine who went to Jackson State University, which is a all-black university. She graduated, and Lucent Technologies, which used to be AT&T,
Mhm.
picked her up. They not only picked her up, but they sent her. She moved to Illinois, and then they end up paying for her to go to work on her master's or MBA at Illinois Institute of Technology, one of the top technology schools in the nation.
Mhm.
Now, because when people got to Mississippi State, they were no longer looking for African Americans.
Mhm.
So I didn't think about that piece. You're no longer really looking. You already got your quota when you went to Jackson State or you went to a different minority school. So, but still, there was this quota thing that we were filling. So after we get the quota, if that's one, that's all we're getting. If that's two, that's all we're getting. And so that has not been in our favor either, because regardless of what your education level is, at times, it just doesn't work in your favor.
Now, the other interesting story, I just recently have been reading the book Becoming by Michelle Obama.
Okay,
So she has the history of her going to Princeton,
okay.
and her husband going, both of them going to Harvard Law School, and she chose to work initially for a white, the institutional law firm, but she wasn't happy there. And he chose, because he had a different kind of background, a non-traditional kind of background, and he chose to work not in a white institutional law firm. He worked more in community organizing, he worked more in positions that were more of a social justice bent to them initially before he got into politics. So it's kind of interesting because he did go to the Harvard, but he chose a different path.
But that is why I think the majority of people go to Harvard or to Princeton or to Yale or to wherever it is that they go. Because those schools, they know if you graduate with that on your resume, you're going to get paid and paid well. And that takes us into corporations. I remember sitting in, where was I at the time? I think I was in France or Amsterdam, one or the other. And I was sitting and having lunch with a coworker. And I was actually a level higher than he was because we had a global team that was looking at how can we make sure this company doesn't get sued doing Y2K when the systems change. And so I was responsible for pulling together the communication strategy. So my team were people in Europe and Japan and Singapore and so forth. So I'm in Europe meeting with him, and this is what he said, and he wasn't being malicious. I mean, John is just a really nice guy. We were sitting down talking, and it just so happened my father had passed away. So he said, "Shirley, how do you do this? I know your father just passed away." And then we, go into other conversations because this is being human. We're just having a human conversation, even though the whole point of our meeting is to make sure that Europe is in order. But anyway, he says, "How do you do it?" And he says, "And on top of that, I know you're making at least 30% less than me and you're higher level." Because that is true. Women make much less than men, even though you could be the same level or higher level. So there's inequality. And when I've looked at stats, Harvard just released some stats about the inequality in corporate America. It's still the same as it was when I was in corporate America 20 years ago. It hasn't changed much. So it's the reason we need to have these conversations, because there are biases, and I think people just don't even truly, like you said, I had no idea the system was set up like this.
Mm-hmm.
But it is set up, and it's set up so well, and it's been set up so long.
I think everybody's just used to it.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, just familiar.
Yeah.
So-
It was familiar, yeah.
Yeah.
And I know part of my experience is very different in that I had some inkling when I was in college because of what I chose to study. Even though I'm from a dominant culture by color,
Mm-hmm.
I had Italian immigrant grandparents. They made me very aware of cultural differences and how that was important to me as I was growing up, and made me want to know more about the Mexican American experience in our state, because I knew that we were originally Mexico. And so I feel like I went to a major university, and then I chose to volunteer my time working in a different culture on a Navajo Indian reservation. And my parents couldn't understand why I would do that, because if you go to a major university, you're supposed to go and try to make money. But because they had enough money to send me to the university, I could make a choice to then volunteer. So even that wasn't from an experience of privilege. And I think because I learned about different cultures as I was in college years and young adult years, and because of my Christian background, I felt like I needed to go out and try to learn more about what was going on in the world. So it was a different experience. And it's also because of having grandparents that came from poverty and were prejudiced against when they came to this country. So that was part of it too.
But that is a trade-off, is that you knew that you would be in professions that probably would not pay, say, what maybe, I don't know, some of your friends may have gone off and done something differently.
And could make the choice.
Yes, and I could make the choice because I didn't have so it's very interesting because that idea of privilege came into play for that as well, because I didn't have a bunch of school debt to pay off.
That's true.
I worked in college, but I didn't have a lot of debt to pay off. So.
There is actually a developing trend now, especially with African American women who are educated, to actually leave the country. And so they've been going to China, to Hong Kong, Europe, and different places, because they can actually get the pay that they want. It's just really interesting. So a lot is going on out there. It's just that I think many of us have just decided, this is just too hard, so I'm going to stop. We're not going to try to keep climbing and, breaking the glass ceiling. We're just going to get out of here. And so now if you go on YouTube, everything's out there. You'll see a number of people who are basically broadcasting from their home or wherever, somewhere in Europe or another country, even South Korea. I just saw a recent one from South Korea, where they're broadcasting, this is, how it is to work here, and, I'm African American, I've been here X amount of years. So it's interesting. I think what's going on now, when you look at the marching, that has never happened before. And I see it as hope, because I see it as God. I feel that anytime an unknown person is killed, nobody in the world, I doubt if he was known outside of his community. And now the whole world knows his name. And that does make you think of how Jesus was done. And so I'm beginning to think something's changing, something's shifting. The whole world for the first time actually came to vocally speak. And I thought it was amazing that I remember them interviewing some people in London, and they said, but the virus is out, so aren't you concerned? It's like, we don't care, because this injustice has been going on in America for far too long. And I was just impressed. I mean, I sat there and cried watching the various ones, because it's like, finally, some kind of help. So it's not, now this will be scary if I say this, but I said it's, when we look at our administration, if you really think about it, if we didn't have who we have, we have ever gotten this much attention.
No, it-
Yeah, it really ignited a
No, it did, it
global-
ignited. If we could become complacent,
Yeah,
we would definitely become complacent.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need that light, you know, that fire under our bodies, whatever
Yeah.
to get us going. And yeah, no, I
That's
agree
how
with
most change happens.
Yeah.
It gets horribly difficult
Mhm. Yep.
and dark, and you can't
Yep.
see a way out, and it gets worse and worse and worse, and then there's an opportunity for transformation.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a hopeful time.
Mhm.
Well, Shirley, I don't want to keep you
Yeah.
any longer. You've got to drive home. Can you tell people where to find your podcast? And then I'll send you this on YouTube. So if you want to put on your podcast, you can.
Okay, and I hate to say, how do I find it? But you can Google me, just
Oh,
Shirley
well, I think
Smith.
yes,
Okay.
you
Oh,
can.
unless you know
Well,
the
Anchor
exact.
FM,
Anchor.fm,
Okay.
and then
Okay.
it's
and then Shirley Smith,
Shirley Smith.
Bridging
Okay.
the Gap.
But I think it's Shirley dash EEWF Cares.
Right. It should be under Bridge the Gap.
But
Well,
Shirley
yes.
Smith,
Yeah, okay,
if
that's
you
fine. I did.
Yeah.
Bridge
Google
the Gap
anywhere,
by
just
Shirley
go to
Smith.
Google
Yeah.
Shirley
Yeah.
Smith, Bridge
Yeah.
the Gap, and you'll
Okay.
find it.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Under
So
her
that's
name
it.
and Bridge
It's
the Gap,
great.
it came up. Yeah.
So
Okay,
thank
I'm
you
gonna
guys.
log
for
Thank
the
you,
time.
Shirley.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here today.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.